So Game of Thrones is a postmodern fable. Um, I don't know Tolkien at all, but I imagine Tolkien as like a modern fable about sort of struggles of good versus evil, and Martin is doing the postmodern version of that, and so the very first thing that has happened is that God is dead. The old order has been replaced by something that we believe to be truer to our human impulses, free of the sort of arbitrary dictates of, divine law, that it's just and it's fair, and that there's accountability, and that people have a voice, and that it's a good system. But the reality is that it's not a good system. It's actually completely corrupt. It's not providing necessarily justice. It still draws its power not from some sort of emanation of the people and their consent. It's driven not by civic duty, but by lust and greed and thirst for power, and so then the story is, once that is toppled, who exactly are we rooting for? What do we think should take its place? So you know, um, each family can be seen to some degree as sort of representing possible options for a way to move forward. And the question is, who will occupy the throne? Who will take God's seat, or who will take the name of organizing principle? And become the sort of, what do we agree on now? Like, what are the new rules? And so you can say, for example, Daenerys is the return of the old order plus some emancipatory language. It's the idea of like the good religion sort of coming back. That there was something good about the old system. It just required another layer of sort of self-awareness. It's deceptive in a sense. I mean, you can tell that in the show already. Daenerys is presented as quite ruthless and does not value human life. So it's a compromised position. You have the Starks, which represent a certain idea of sort of like noble, like loyalty to the idea of rule, and sort of respect for the rule of law, and sort of the people who sort of do it by the book. They make oaths, and they keep their oaths, and they're true to their word, and uh, uh, and they follow the old tradition. And the show's inherent criticism of that, I think, is that it makes all the Starks vulnerable to being manipulated, because they believe that justice will work out in the end, and that belief sort of makes them naive. The Lannisters would be the sort of expediency of self-interest and greed. It would be the sort of Ayn Rand objectivists. We serve our own interests. We protect ourselves. If everybody would just do that, everything would be okay. Uh, you know, um, what was that? Um, let's see, who else? Uh, Stannis, I guess, was just like the, sort of um, like the inevitability, like those that believe in the sort of the like inevitability of a certain kind of like truth or something. Uh, and so it goes from being sort of like those that are like you know, compelled to do something not because it corresponds to their needs, but because I'm the heir, I'm the next in line. I gotta like take, you know, I gotta become king, not because I've been craving to be king all my life or anything like that. I just sort of have to do it. Duty, you know, do your duty. Go on, do your duty. Um, and that's fanaticism, right? Like the underside of that is that like its mirror image is fanaticism, and it's actually indistinguishable from fanaticism because it acts as if there cannot be any alternative to this truth. And I suppose yeah, I can't. You know, if I were to try to think about the Ironborn and I mean are they this sort of like like crust punk anarchos who just like want to live just off the hard work? I mean, that's ridiculous to say that, but off the efforts of others. Are the are the Tyrells, uh, uh, the sort of the artists and the Martells are the sort of like the bon vivant hedonists, who, like the Latins, and then who are the Knights, the Night's Watch. This is not my theory. I owe this to a friend who probably doesn't want to be quoted. Maybe does. Not really the person who craves this kind of credit. Uh, that the Watchers on the Wall are those that hold the line between culture and what is perceived to be truly outside of it. So this idea was really put together in the first season. So there was this sense that north of the wall there was a certain kind of like uh, uh, you know anti sort of state, anti civilization, anti state kind of the free folk that sort of follow no king, and which again there's problems with that, not as a theory but as a position. And then the Dothraki, who were these sort of the I think it was that the Dothraki were sort of mother worshippers, sort of like return to paganism, clanism and tribalism, uh, and the free folk were like libertarians, uh, like anarcho-libertarians. So one was a kind of sort of regressive sort of return, and the other was this sort of like post state, like the the dismantlement of culture. And so the Night's Watch and the Wall, he thought were like the artists who like dress all in black and are like sort of committed to this cause where they don't necessarily earn, and they're kind of like liminal in their sort of positioning within culture and outside of culture, and not necessarily like allied to the same goals as everybody else, but it's unclear because they're so completely beholden to certain forces, and that they themselves are a kind of they are pretending that there is a line, like they are the ones who create the line and then position themselves striding above it, and acting as if the line was somehow inevitable and arbitrary when it was totally it's a construct of theirs that makes a distinction between populations that or groups that wouldn't otherwise be distinct necessarily. I mean, other than the ways I mentioned. And so yeah, and so that's like a little like that's a roundup of Game of Thrones as a postmodern tale.